Her daughter-in-law stole the winning lottery ticket, right out of her guest room safe. Irene Mitchell, retired cafeteria worker and quiet matriarch, didn't raise her voice. By the time Crystal filed a fake claim, the real one had already cleared, under a trust no one could trace back. She'd been mocked for her scratchers, dismissed like wallpaper. But when the truth surfaced, it wasn't loud. It was legal. And as reputations crumbled, Irene didn't flinch. She wasn't just their mother anymore. She was their consequence. Before we begin, may I ask, where in this big, beautiful world are you listening from? It's always a quiet honor to know who's sharing this space. Drop it in the comments. And don't forget to subscribe. The late sun stretched long amber fingers over the cul-de-sac as the Hendersons' backyard came alive with the smell of grilled ribs, lawn chairs scraping on concrete, and kids darting through sprinklers, shrieking with joy. Irene placed her cherry cobbler on the folding table beside a sweating bowl of potato salad, dusted her hands on her apron, and gave her youngest son a smile like a well-rehearsed performance. "Brought your favorite, Derek," she said softly, "just like when you were little." Derek looked up from the grill, tongs in hand, his ball cap stained with sweat. "If it doesn't have that cinnamon kick, I'm calling the cops," he joked. Laughter rippled through the group. His wife, Crystal, lounging in a wicker chair with a plastic cup of rosé, tossed her head back and added, "As long as she didn't pay for it with scratchers." That cracked Derek up. "Mom's still buying scratch-offs like it's a retirement plan." Irene chuckled faintly, smoothing the front of her floral dress. Her laugh didn't quite reach her eyes. Inside her purse, tucked between a wrinkled CVS receipt and a worn chapstick, was a folded photocopy of a ticket that said otherwise. $5,000. The winning numbers were etched into her brain, burned there the moment the clerk at the gas station went pale and said, "Ma'am, you better sit down." She hadn't. Not then. Not now. "Maybe she'll win and forget who we are," Crystal added with a cackle that cut a little too sharp. More laughter. No one noticed how Irene's fingers had tightened slightly around the handles of her purse. She gave a warm smile and said, "Excuse me one moment," before stepping inside the house. The cool air inside Derek and Crystal's kitchen felt sterile. Too much quartz, too much white. The house had never felt like family to her, more like a showroom pretending to be one. She made her way through the hallway with quiet steps, careful not to disturb the photos lining the walls. Graduation shots, their Cancun trip, Derek's promotion to branch manager. Upstairs, she entered the guest bedroom where she stayed during visits. Behind the framed picture of her and Derek at his high school graduation was the small fireproof safe she always traveled with. She knelt down, spun the dial, and opened it. There it was, the real ticket. Crisp, untouched, hidden behind some expired bonds and a birth certificate no one ever asked about anymore. She looked at it for a long time, the numbers glowing in the dim light like a secret she wasn't sure she should be proud of. She had never told them. Not her sons, not their wives, not even her sister back in Virginia. Because she'd seen what money did to people, how it turned love into leverage, how it turned gratitude into greed. But today, as they laughed about her scratchers like she was a foolish old lady, she'd felt it. Something inside her shifting, not quite anger, something colder. She relocked the safe, carefully rearranged the frame photo, and returned to the party, just in time to be handed a lukewarm paper plate of brisket. Later that night, the house was quiet. Everyone had said their good nights. She sat alone in her guest room, watching shadows crawl across the ceiling. Then something gnawed at her, just a feeling, a tug behind her ribs. She crossed the room, opened the closet, pulled the safe out again, knelt, spun the dial. The door creaked open. The bonds were still there, the birth certificate, but the winning ticket was gone. Her hand hovered inside the empty space. She checked behind the bonds, under the certificate. She flipped the safe upside down. Nothing. No sound came out of her mouth, but her breathing turned jagged. Her eyes darted around the room, the closed door, the hallway outside, the silent house. Someone had been in here, someone new, someone had taken everything. And the laughter from earlier that day, hollow, thoughtless, sharp, echoed in her memory, but this time, it sounded like a warning. The next morning, Irene sat at Cleo's kitchen table with a mug of black coffee she hadn't touched. Her fingers curled around the ceramic like it might steady her, but nothing could still the icy clarity running through her veins now. Cleo sliced into a peach with the same quiet intensity she used to cut through bad men and good gossip. Her kitchen smelled like coconut oil and lemon Lysol. It was the one place Irene could breathe without feeling judged. Irene didn't blink when she said, "They took the copy. I filed the claim 3 days ago." Cleo froze, knife hovering midair. Then, slowly, like savoring a line from a revenge movie, she turned and looked at her friend. "You stone-cold bitch," she whispered. Then broke into a grin. "You're colder than they'll ever be. I love it." The tension broke like a thin sheet of glass. Irene let out a soft breath and finally took a sip of the now cool coffee. Her hands were steady. Her eyes were steel. "They laughed at me, Cleo, at the cookout. Like I was a walking joke. Like I'm some dotty old woman still clinging to superstition." "They don't know what you've seen," Cleo muttered, reaching for a paper towel. "What you've done for them. I've seen it. Hell, I was there when you worked doubles at the school cafeteria just to pay Derek's tuition." Irene nodded slowly. "And now Crystal's in my guest room, taking pictures of what doesn't belong to her. Let me guess, she left the safe unlocked for a reason?" Irene's smile was faint, wicked at the edges. "They didn't steal it. I placed it. Just like bait in a trap." She leaned back in her chair, and for the first time in hours, her voice softened. Not with sadness, but calculation. "Last Tuesday, I skipped lunch and drove straight to the regional lottery office in Charleston, parked behind a Winn-Dixie, and changed into the only blazer I own." "You looked good in that blazer," Cleo said, raising an eyebrow. "Real rich widow energy." Irene gave a dry chuckle. "The clerk there took one look at the numbers and got real polite. Offered me water, sat me down like I was fragile. Men only call you ma'am when they think you're rich or about to faint." "I was neither," Irene said. "I signed the original ticket, had it notarized, filed everything under the Sycamore Haven Trust. Name doesn't trace back to me unless I want it to." Cleo let out a low whistle. "You're playing chess, and Crystal's out here bragging like she found God's ATM." Irene's eyes narrowed. She reached into her handbag and pulled out her phone. Opened Facebook. No emotion crossed her face as she handed it to Cleo. There it was, a new post, just an hour old. "Crystal Henderson, blessed and highly favored. Big things coming soon. Don't ask how, just watch. Leveling up. New season. Hotch's big things coming." Cleo stared at the post like it was poison. This dumb heifer. "She thinks she won," Irene said quietly. "She thinks she's already living the life. She's about to find out what theft tastes like. They took the bait. Crystal must have thought she was slick. Probably waited until I was in the shower. Derek wouldn't have the nerve, but her? She's greedy with a god complex." Cleo got up and poured more coffee into Irene's cup. "What are you going to do next?" Irene looked out the window where the autumn wind stirred the wind chimes. Her voice was even. "Nothing." Cleo blinked. "What do you mean nothing?" "Let them celebrate. Let her start ordering handbags and hinting at Teslas. Let them tell everyone they know that a miracle is coming. The more noise they make, the harder they'll fall," Cleo finished, smiling. "They'll go to claim it," Irene said, standing up slowly. "Walk into that same office, all proud and swollen-headed. And when they do, they'll find out the ticket's already been claimed. In a trust with no connection to their names. Just an old woman with nothing to her name and a few scratchers in her purse." Silence fell between them, rich and electric. Cleo finally said, "You always were the quiet one. Still waters, huh?" "Still," Irene murmured, picking up her purse. "But deep." She stepped out onto Cleo's porch as a gust of wind sent dry leaves skittering down the sidewalk, like whispers trying to outrun a secret. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders and headed to the car Crystal had told her was on its last leg. Back inside, Cleo was about to close the door when her phone dinged again. Another post, this time from Derek. Derek Henderson. God is opening doors no man can shut. Sometimes he uses scratchers. Favor? We claim it, Cleo muttered under her breath. Lord, this is going to be fun. The call came at 9:17 a.m., just as Irene was pulling a sheet of pumpkin bread from the oven. Ms. Mitchell, the voice said, crisp and professional. This is Dan Greeley with the South Carolina State Lottery Commission. Do you have a moment to talk? Irene smiled faintly, placed the loaf on a wire rack, and lowered the volume on the kitchen radio, playing soft jazz. Of course, she said, as if she hadn't been waiting for this exact moment like a conductor waiting to cue the final crescendo. There's been an irregularity, Dan continued. Someone attempted to submit a duplicate claim on a winning ticket you've already filed through the Sycamore Haven Trust. The individual presented a photocopy, not the original, and used an alias that doesn't appear connected to any prior lottery history. Irene stirred her coffee slowly, letting the silence hang just long enough to sound surprised, but not too surprised. Is that so? She murmured. We're flagging it for internal fraud review, and we're opening a potential theft case. The attempted claimant submitted forged identification, digitally altered documents that didn't hold up under verification protocols. He paused. The next question loaded with polite implication. Would it be all right if I stop by? There's a few things we'd like to confirm for our records. Irene's voice didn't waver. I'll have coffee waiting. By the time Cleo arrived, Irene already had the claim receipt printed, notarized copies in a manila folder, time-stamped footage from the claim center queued up on her laptop, and a fresh pot of dark roast brewing. Cleo walked in with 2 newspapers under her arm and a grin as wide as payday. They tried it, didn't they? They tried it, Irene confirmed, placing sugar and cream on the table with the same care she once used to pack Derek's lunchboxes. Cleo let out a low whistle. You're not just getting revenge. You're teaching a master class. They think this is about money, Irene said, brushing a crumb from the table. It's not. It's about dignity, Cleo said, nodding. And memory. And consequences, Irene added softly. Something this generation thinks only exists on TV. Dan Greeley arrived right on time. He was younger than she expected, late 30s, with a pressed shirt and the kind of cautious friendliness government agents wore like armor. Thank you for your time, ma'am, he said, as she led him to the dining room. She slid the folder across the table without a word. Inside, the original claim receipt with the date and signature, the notarized form listing the Sycamore Haven Trust, Irene's photo ID taken at the claim center, a USB drive containing surveillance footage from the office lobby, her walking in, speaking to the clerk, and handing over the real ticket. Dan whistled low under his breath. You were ready. I've been ready for a long time, she said. He studied her for a beat. You understand this is a criminal matter now? I understand someone tried to take what wasn't theirs, she said, and I expect the law to handle it. Dan nodded, flipping the folder closed. We'll move forward with a formal investigation. If this turns into a prosecution, would you be willing to testify? I won't need to, Irene said, rising to refill his coffee. Everything they need to convict is already in that folder. That afternoon, her phone buzzed with a message from a familiar number. Derek. Hey, Mom. Weird question. Any chance you might have misplaced something from your safe? She stared at the screen, her thumb hovering over the reply button. Misplaced. Like she'd left it behind with a library book or forgotten it under a couch cushion. She didn't respond. Not yet. Instead, she copied the message and forwarded it to Cleo with a single note. Checkmate, move 3. Within minutes, Cleo replied, Do not flinch. Let him sweat like a preacher at a strip club. Irene sat back in her recliner, the autumn light falling through the blinds in golden slats. Outside, the neighborhood kids screamed with laughter, their innocence still intact, untouched by the small betrayals that choked adulthood. Her phone buzzed again. Derek. Just wondering if maybe you had 2 tickets? Crystal thought she saw. Never mind. Just call me if you find anything. Okay? Weird week. This time, her smile came slowly. Because now, he wasn't accusing. He was fishing. He was afraid. Not of her, not yet. But of what she might know, what she might say, what she might already have done. And fear, Irene knew, was the most honest kind of confession. Back in the quiet of her dining room, she slid the folder of documents into the hollowed-out base of an old cookie tin labeled rice flour in faded red letters, a decoy in a house full of them. Just as she was closing the lid, her landline rang, a number she didn't recognize. She let it go to voicemail. A beat passed, then another, and then the ding of a text. Crystal, we need to talk urgently. Irene stared at the name, then closed her phone and opened the front door to let the cold air rush in. The meeting was held at the small satellite office of the South Carolina State Lottery's Compliance Division. Beige walls, metal chairs, the air faintly metallic from years of microwave burritos and nervous sweat. Dan Greeley greeted them in the lobby with a practiced, polite smile. Derek, Crystal, thanks for coming in. Derek nodded stiffly. His jaw was tight. Crystal smiled too wide, sunglasses perched on top of her head, even though it was overcast outside. She wore too much perfume, the kind that tried to scream money, but whispered drugstore. Dan led them into a windowless room with a round table and a pitcher of water. Let's make this simple, he said, easing into the seat across from them. We're trying to resolve a discrepancy related to a recent lottery claim attempt. Crystal leaned forward, faux casual. Sure, no problem. It's probably just a mix-up. Dan offered her a clipboard with a basic intake form. You indicated the winning ticket was found at your residence? Crystal smoothed her ponytail. It was in our kitchen drawer, just sitting there. We didn't even know what it was at first. Dan blinked slowly. So, you found a $5 million ticket? In a drawer? She laughed, a little too hard. I know, right? Wild. And you both believe this ticket belonged to you? Derek finally spoke. Mom gave it to us, kinda quietly, like a gift, a weird, private moment. Dan didn't move, didn't blink, just opened the folder in front of him with clinical precision and slid a paper across the table. Signed and notarized affidavit, he said, dated 5 days before your attempted claim. It confirms the original ticket was filed by Irene Mitchell through the Sycamore Haven Trust, with timestamps, ID verification, and surveillance footage to corroborate. Crystal's smile faltered. Derek's hand curled into a loose fist on the table. Dan continued, his voice even, unhurried. So, I'll ask again. Where did you get the ticket? Crystal's voice rose, defensive. Like I said, it was in the kitchen. Maybe she forgot it. Maybe she meant for us to find it. She's old. Sometimes she... Your mother-in-law, a woman who's been buying scratch-offs for 20 years, just forgot about a $5 million ticket and happened to leave it in your drawer? Derek shifted in his seat. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. She left it in the safe, Dan said flatly. A locked fireproof safe in the guest bedroom closet. Not a drawer, not the couch. Not the trash, a safe. Crystal opened her mouth, but Dan held up one hand like a traffic cop. And not only that, she filed the claim first, under a legal trust, with a time-stamped entry that predates your copy by nearly a week. He let that sit for a beat, then leaned in, voice calm but colder now. Presenting a counterfeit ticket is a serious offense, but forging legal identification, using a falsified name to claim someone else's money, that bumps things into felony territory. He pulled another document from the folder and placed it between them. Theft of an asset over $10,000 is felony fraud under South Carolina law. That carries real jail time. Crystal swallowed hard. Her lipstick smudged slightly at the corner as her mouth twisted into something between defiance and panic. We didn't steal anything. We didn't know. Dan turned his gaze on Derek. Do you believe that? Derek glanced at Crystal, then at the paper, then away. I don't know what to believe right now, he mumbled. It's been a weird week. Dan closed the folder with a quiet snap. You're not under arrest. Yet. But you should know that our office is referring this to the Attorney General for review. You'll likely be contacted by investigators. Crystal stood abruptly. So what, we're being accused? Of stealing from family? Dan stood as well. No one's using that word, yet. Crystal's voice cracked. We're the victims here. She set us up. She tricked us. Dan stared at her for a long, flat second. She filed a winning lottery ticket. You tried to file a photocopy. You tell me who looks like the trickster here. Silence. Cold and sharp. Derek's voice was barely above a whisper. We just thought she'd want us to have it. Dan opened the door. That's the problem with assumptions, he said. They don't hold up in court. In the parking lot, Derek unlocked the car with trembling hands. Crystal slid into the passenger seat and slammed the door. She played us, Crystal muttered. That bitch played us. Derek didn't answer, because deep down, under the heat of shame and fear and unraveling pride, he knew she hadn't just played them. She'd won. The clang of metal on pavement echoed down Magnolia Court just after 6:00 p.m. A socket wrench hit the curb. Then came a red Craftsman toolbox, flung open midair, sockets and screws skittering like marbles. One by one, Derek's tools rained onto the front lawn, catching the sunset in silver streaks as they scattered. Crystal stood barefoot on the porch, mascara already smeared under her left eye. She hurled his Milwaukee drill with both hands like it was cursed. You think you can lie to me, and I'll just nod and smile like your mama? Across the street, Irene sat in her rocking chair, steeping a bag of Earl Grey in her favorite chipped mug. She didn't blink, just stirred slowly, eyes trained on the scene like it was unfolding on a flat screen. From her left, Cleo whistled low, settling into the wicker chair beside her. Girl, you sure this ain't a limited series? Feels like one, Irene said, without looking away. Neighbors lingered on porches. Garage doors paused halfway down. Someone's little boy stopped riding his scooter, slack-jawed, as Crystal screamed. You ruined this for us. Derek, she threw a pair of worn work gloves at him like they were evidence. Do you realize what we had? What we could have had? That was our way out, Derek. That was my only real chance at freedom. You act like I planned this, Derek shot back, trying to scoop his tools into a torn cardboard box. You were the one who said we should do it. I never said steal it. You didn't stop me either, because you wouldn't listen. Crystal marched down the porch steps, face red, her voice shrill. You let me walk into a state office with a forged ID and a fake smile. You watched me hand over that ticket. Now I'm the one with felony charges hanging over my head and you're over here talking about misunderstandings like a damn child. I didn't know she'd set us up, he muttered. Crystal shoved a pair of pliers into his chest so hard he stumbled back. She didn't set us up, Derek. She protected what was hers. You know what that makes us? He didn't answer. Crystal laughed bitterly, voice cracking. Thieves. We're just broke-ass thieves who thought we were smarter than a woman who's been burying secrets since the Reagan era. She turned, stormed back inside, and slammed the door hard enough to rattle windows. Derek stood alone in the golden hour light, the yard littered with half his livelihood. Across the street, Cleo sipped her tea. Better than Netflix, she murmured. Irene's gaze didn't waver. Watch what he does next, she said softly. He knocked just after 8 p.m. Irene had just turned off the stove, collards still warm in the pot, cornbread cooling on the windowsill. She didn't flinch when she saw his face through the door glass. She simply unlocked it, stepped aside, and let him in. He looked like a man who hadn't figured out how to lose yet. His eyes were bloodshot, shoulders hunched, but he still carried the clumsy entitlement of someone who believed an apology was currency. I didn't come to fight, he said. I didn't ask you to, she replied, folding a towel and placing it on the counter. He looked around the kitchen like it had grown smaller since his childhood. Like the table where he once did homework now judged him silently. She's gone, he said. Packed a bag. Said she's staying at her sister's. Irene didn't react. He leaned on the counter. I wanted to say I'm sorry. About what? He swallowed. About what happened. About the ticket. I didn't think you'd even notice it was gone. She turned to face him, calm as ever. You didn't just steal from me, Derek. He blinked. I know, You stole my name. That made him pause. You walked into an office with my legacy in your pocket, she continued, voice low and cold. Used your wife's fake ID, claimed what I earned. Like I was dead. Like I didn't matter. I thought we were family, he said, almost pleading now. Family, she repeated. Funny word for someone who assumed I'd be too old, too naive, too silent to fight back. He took a step forward. Mom, please. She raised one hand. You wanted freedom? She asked. You thought $5 million would fix everything? You don't even know what freedom costs. He stood frozen. You think you're scared now, she said, stepping closer. This isn't fear. This is the warning bell. Then, softer. The storm's still coming. She opened the door, quiet, firm. Derek hesitated, then stepped out into the dark. Irene closed the door behind him and slid the bolt. Her phone buzzed once on the counter. Cleo. Attorney General's office just requested your file. It's happening. The rain had started early that morning, soft, steady, the kind that didn't demand attention but refused to stop. It drummed gently against the office windows as Irene sat across from Miles Garrity, her longtime estate attorney, a man with thinning silver hair and the patience of an old owl. He adjusted his glasses, scanned the thick folder in front of him, and said, So, you're certain about this? Irene nodded once. Every word. Miles tapped his pen thoughtfully against the page. You're cutting Derek out completely. Power of attorney, inheritance, executor status. Everything. Everything, she said again, her voice even. The trust, the accounts, the house. All of it needs to move where it'll do some good. Miles exhaled through his nose, eyes kind but cautious. You've got a good heart, Irene, but I have to say, most folks wouldn't be this calm about disinheriting their only son. She gave him a faint smile. Most folks didn't raise mine. He studied her for a beat, then pushed the papers across the desk. All right, let's start with the new trust. The words on the page were deliberate, sharp as clean-cut glass. The Sycamore Haven Community Fund, a perpetual trust dedicated to supporting adult literacy programs, vocational scholarships, and community college grants. I want it all funneled through the County Education Board, Irene said, her finger tracing the clause. Transparent, audited yearly, no loopholes. Miles nodded. You'll be the founding trustee. After you, the fund rolls over to a community-appointed committee. She sat back, eyes soft but focused. Let them build something from what my family tried to destroy. He flipped another page. And this one, Cleo Harper's granddaughter, correct? Irene smiled, the first genuine one of the day. Lena, she's 14, smart as a whip, reads everything she can get her hands on. That girl's going to change the world if someone gives her the chance. Miles chuckled. You're establishing a college account in her name? Prepaid tuition and a small living stipend. Cleo doesn't know yet. She'll cry, Miles said. I hope so, Irene replied. She's overdue for a happy cry. Miles kept writing. The legal language clicked into place, line by line, signature by signature. The machinery of legacy grinding forward with quiet efficiency. When they reached the last page, he looked up. And your house? Transfer it, she said. Title goes into the trust immediately. No heirs. That way no one can file a claim against it later. Miles frowned slightly. You're protecting yourself from potential litigation? I'm protecting my peace, Irene said simply. There's a difference. She signed the last line with slow precision, her handwriting steady, elegant, and final. Miles gathered the stack of documents, tapped them neatly into alignment, and slipped them into a folder. It's done! For the first time in months, Irene exhaled without that small tremor of guardedness in her chest. Thank you, Miles. He stood, offering his hand. You're one hell of a woman, Irene Mitchell. She clasped his hand firmly. You're damn right I am. By the time she pulled back into her driveway, the rain had tapered into mist. Cleo's car was already parked out front, trunk half open, the smell of cinnamon and butter floating through the damp air. Cleo met her on the porch, flour dusted across her sweatshirt. You did it, didn't you? Irene hung her umbrella on the hook. Every clause, every signature. Cleo grinned, setting a pie on the table between them. Then we celebrate the right way. Apple bourbon crumble. Warm, not sorry. They cut 2 thick slices, steam rising into the rain-scented evening. The street was quiet, eerily so, as if Magnolia Court itself was waiting for someone to whisper what came next. You ever think he'll come around? Cleo asked. Irene chewed slowly, swallowed, then shook her head. I stopped thinking about what he'll do. I started thinking about what I'll leave. Cleo's eyes softened. You always were playing the long game. I had to, Irene said. They bet against time. I bet on it. The phone on the table buzzed. Irene glanced at the screen. Unknown number. She let it ring, then another call. Unknown number, then another. Cleo frowned. You gonna answer? Irene pressed decline. No need. Seconds later, a voicemail alert popped up. Then another call, this time from a familiar area code. Cleo leaned over to pick. Oh, hell. Crystal's parents. Seems so. What do they want? Irene sipped her tea. An audience. Maybe absolution. She scrolled down, hit block contact. Then she did it again. And again, until the list of block numbers read like a small phone book. Finally, she turned the phone face down. Let them talk to the dial tone. Cleo laughed, half delighted, half in awe. You really done with all of them, huh? Irene stared out at the gray street, the puddles catching faint reflections of porch lights. There's a difference between family and blood, she said. Blood is inherited. Family is earned. Cleo raised her fork in salute. To the family we build. Irene clinked her fork against it. To the peace we keep. They ate in silence for a while, the sound of rain returning in slow rhythm against the tin roof. Then faintly from somewhere down the block came the low hum of an engine. Headlight swept across the curtains, cutting through the quiet like a blade. Cleo looked toward the window. You expecting company? Irene's face didn't change. No. The car idled a moment, then eased to the curb. A beat of stillness, then a soft knock at the door. The photo ran above the fold of the Sunday paper, bright and full of grace. There was Irene Mitchell, smiling in a red cardigan, sitting cross-legged on a library rug. 3 children huddled close beside her. One girl leaned against her shoulder like she belonged there. Irene held an open copy of Charlotte's Web, her eyes mid-laugh, caught in a moment of quiet joy. The headline read, Scratch-Off Angel, Lottery Winner, Donates Millions to Education Fund, by Lydia Sims, Magnolia Tribune. The article was reverent. It spoke of decades Irene spent as a school cafeteria worker, her lifelong love of books, and how she used her unexpected fortune to seed a community education trust for those too often overlooked. There was no mention of family, just legacy. On page A6, a sidebar quoted the local pastor from Zion Baptist Church. Miss Irene always gave more than she had. Now she's just giving it from a bigger pocket. Across town, Crystal stared at the paper in the Dollar General parking lot, hands shaking. That lying, she hissed. She makes it look like we don't even exist. Derek, behind the wheel, said nothing. His eyes were vacant, not angry, not even stunned anymore, just hollow. They both saw it coming, just not how fast. It started at the grocery store, A cashier who used to laugh at Crystal's jokes suddenly stopped making eye contact. Then a neighbor turned their back on Derek at the gas pump. A couple from church walked past them on Main Street like they were fog on the sidewalk. By Tuesday, Zion Baptist had quietly removed them from the donation board in the fellowship hall. By Thursday, they weren't invited to the monthly couples supper. On Friday, Pastor Willard stopped returning their texts. Then there were the whispers at the coffee shop, the stares at the hardware store, the silence everywhere else. Reputation, they learned, was a currency harder to earn than money and easier to lose. Crystal tried to fight back. She posted a long rebuttal on Facebook, fingers flying over the keyboard like fists. Crystal Henderson, people don't know the whole story. That woman ain't some saint. She's vindictive, and she set us up. You don't know what really happened. Trust me, there's another side. Within minutes, the comments lit up. Kendra Ince, you tried to steal from your mother-in-law, and now you mad she donated the money instead. Real Tony J. There's another side. I got caught. Girl. Bye. J. Martinez, 79. Maybe if you weren't so busy faking IDs, you'd still be on the church board. Crystal deleted the post before lunch, but the screenshots lived on. Derek's business began bleeding clients. First slowly, one canceled landscaping job, a couple no-shows, then came the flood. Homeowners rescheduled and never followed up. 2 clients ghosted mid-contract. One woman left a review that simply read, "Can't trust someone who lies to their own mama." His calls went unanswered. His quotes rejected. His once decent little business now shrank by the hour. His truck sitting idle in the driveway like a monument to failure. You see what she did to us? Crystal snapped one night, standing in their kitchen. She didn't just win. She made us vanish. Derek didn't answer. He couldn't. Because deep down, he knew the truth. Irene hadn't made them vanish. They'd done that part themselves. She'd just turned on the lights. Across the street, Irene sat on her porch, shelling peas into a steel bowl while Cleo flipped through the paper again, pausing on the photo. You ever get tired of seeing yourself smile? Not yet, Irene said, eyes crinkling. But ask me next week. They both laughed. Just then, a white car pulled up to the curb and idled. Cleo raised an eyebrow. That your reporter again? UPS, Irene said, glancing up briefly. Wrong house? The driver got out, left a slim package on Cleo's porch, and drove away. Cleo stepped over and picked it up. No return address, just her name, typed neatly. Inside was a bouquet, wildflowers wrapped in craft paper, tied with a velvet ribbon. Tucked into the stems was a card. No signature, just for having her back. Cleo blinked. You send this? Irene shook her head. Wasn't me. Well, hell, Cleo whispered. Looks like you're not the only one who saw what really happened. Later that night, as Irene watered the mums lining her walkway, she paused to stretch her back and looked down the street. The Hendersons' porch light was off. Their yard, once obsessively trimmed, was overgrown at the edges. A child's tricycle lay on its side in the grass, abandoned, muddy. Crystal's car hadn't moved in days. It struck her not as victory, but as the slow math of karma finally solving itself. Then from the side of the house, movement. A shadow passed behind her hydrangeas. She turned. No one there, but a strange tightness crept across her shoulders. Her instincts didn't scream, but they stirred. She stepped inside, locked the door, and closed the blinds. Peace, she reminded herself. But even peace can tremble before what comes next. The courthouse smelled faintly of lemon cleaner and paper, the scent of order trying to cover years of human mess. Reporters crowded the steps, microphones like spears angled toward the entrance. A low hum of anticipation pulsed through the air, the kind that builds right before a verdict or a storm. Inside, Irene sat in the second row, hands folded neatly in her lap, a light blue cardigan buttoned all the way to her collarbone. Her posture was precise, but not tense. She looked less like a victim than a witness to her own prophecy fulfilled. Cleo sat directly behind her, notebook balanced on one knee, a pen twirling between her fingers. She leaned forward and whispered, "You ready for this?" Irene didn't turn. "It's already done," she said softly. "This is just the paperwork catching up." At the defense table, Crystal stared down at her trembling hands. Her once glossy nails were chipped. Her makeup faded, her expression hollowed out. Derek sat beside her, jaw clenched, his tie too tight, his eyes darting anywhere but forward. The courtroom murmured until the bailiff barked, "All rise." Judge Madison Porter entered, a woman in her 60s with silver hair coiled like authority itself. She took her seat, glanced at the docket, and said, "State of South Carolina versus Crystal Henderson and Derek Henderson. Charges: attempted fraud, forgery, and misuse of protected financial access." Her gavel struck once, sharp, final. The prosecutor rose. "Your Honor, after negotiation with counsel, the defendant Crystal Henderson has agreed to plead no contest to attempted fraud. The state recommends probation, community service, and restitution." Judge Porter's eyes flicked toward Crystal. "Mrs. Henderson, do you understand the terms of this plea?" Crystal nodded weakly. "Yes, Your Honor." "And you accept that by pleading no contest. You're not admitting guilt, but accepting the penalties as if you had." "Yes, ma'am," she whispered. The judge leaned forward slightly. "And why did you try to cash a ticket you didn't earn?" Crystal blinked, frozen. The courtroom held its breath. I don't know," she said at last, her voice cracking. "It was stupid. It was desperate. I thought it'd make things better." "Did it?" Crystal shook her head. "No, ma'am." Judge Porter studied her for a long, quiet moment. "Desperation doesn't erase intent. $5 million doesn't fix a soul that won't own its mistakes." Then her gaze shifted to Derek. "Mr. Henderson," she said, "the prosecution has recommended restitution for misuse of access, meaning you knowingly assisted in the attempt, though you didn't personally file the claim." Derek cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor." "Do you have anything to say before sentencing?" He hesitated. "Just that I didn't mean for it to get this far. I didn't—" The judge raised a hand. "Intent again. It's a funny word, isn't it? Always halfway between excuse and truth." She sat back. "You'll pay restitution of $25,000 to the state for investigative costs. Probation for 1 year. No further contact with the claimant." Derek's shoulders sagged like someone had cut the strings holding him up. Then the judge turned toward Irene. "Mrs. Mitchell," she said, her tone softening just a shade. "You've been remarkably patient throughout this process. Would you like to make a statement before we conclude?" Every camera in the room shifted toward her. Irene stood. Her movements were deliberate, steady, the rhythm of someone who'd lived long enough to know when silence carried the most weight. "I forgave them," she began. Her voice was warm but resolute. "But I won't excuse them." Crystal's head lifted, tears streaking through mascara. Irene continued, "Forgiveness isn't the same as forgetting. It's setting down the weight so you can walk straight again. I'm not carrying this anymore. They'll have to carry their own." The judge nodded once. "That's probably the wisest statement this court will hear all month." Laughter rippled faintly, respectful, through the gallery. Cleo smiled through a quiet tear and scribbled in her notebook, "Write the ending you want." When Irene sat back down, the judge spoke again. "Mrs. Mitchell, you've shown restraint most people couldn't muster. The court commends your composure and your choice to turn adversity into something bigger than yourself." Irene simply said, "Thank you, Your Honor," and folded her hands again. Gavel. Sentence rendered. Case closed. Outside, the air was thick with humidity and camera flashes. Reporters swarmed the steps like gulls chasing breadcrumbs. Crystal clung to Derek's arm, trying to push past them, but one microphone caught her square in the face. "Mrs. Henderson, any comment on the plea?" She blinked into the harsh sunlight, eyes red and swollen. "We made mistakes, okay? Everyone's made mistakes. Do you regret it?" Her breath caught. "Every damn second." Shutters clicked, freezing her mid-tear. By evening, the local news had the photo. Crystal Henderson crying outside the courthouse. The caption beneath read, "Forgiveness given, but not forgotten." That night, Irene and Cleo sat on the porch again, the air heavy with summer cicadas and distant thunder. Cleo turned the page of her notebook, reading back a line she'd written. Some people build bridges. Some just burn better than they ever built. She really said that? Irene asked. Cleo grinned. Close enough. Lightning flashed far off beyond the trees. The storm wasn't here yet, but it was coming. Irene looked out at the dark horizon and said quietly, "Let it." The tow truck came at 7:13 a.m. Derek watched from the living room window, arms folded, jaw clenched. The old F-150 he'd bought fresh off the lot 7 years ago, his pride, his rolling billboard, his damn office on wheels, rolled away in reverse, winched up onto the flatbed like a broken promise. The repo man didn't even knock. He just waved, polite but not warm, then pulled off down Magnolia Court with a groan of gears and the taillights fading into daylight. Inside, Crystal sat at the kitchen table filling out forms on her phone, her fingernail tapping against the screen. "Do we qualify for WIC?" she muttered. "Do you even know?" Derek didn't answer. He just stood there, watching the truck disappear, trying to calculate how many yards of mulch he'd have to spread to undo a public downfall. "Didn't think I'd be filing for food stamps this year," Crystal added, voice tight. "Thought it'd be beach houses and bottle service." She laughed once. It came out like glass breaking. Across town, Irene sat in the office of Principal Joyner at Magnolia High. On the desk between them lay a check. Handwritten, clean, no corners cut. $100,000. Sycamore Haven Adult Ed Grant. Purpose, GED and continuing Ed Scholarship Program. "It'll go toward prep courses, materials, tutoring hours," Irene said. "And for every student who passes, they get a prepaid community college class of their choice." Principal Joyner's eyes watered. "Irene, that kind of money changes lives." "I know," she said. "That's the point." Later that afternoon, Cleo set a pitcher of sweet tea on the porch between them and kicked off her shoes. "You could have bought yourself a whole new life with that money," she said. "Instead, you turned it into a future other people can borrow from." Irene smiled without looking up. She was sewing a loose button on her old cardigan. "You turned that prize into a legacy," Cleo added. "Not a lifestyle." Irene knotted the thread and snipped it. "I used to pray they'd see my worth. Used to cry into my hands when they forgot my birthday, or told me not to come by unannounced." She held up the needle. "Now I build with people who already did." Cleo nodded slowly. "That's the kind of peace you can't put a number on." That evening, Irene stopped by the library, the one where her photo still hung by the checkout desk. She was dropping off a few new copies of To Kill a Mockingbird she'd purchased with the education fund's discretionary money. No receipt required. Miss Irene, Molly, one of the Saturday regulars, came skipping over from the beanbag reading corner. The 8-year-old had her hair in 2 puffballs and construction paper glue on her chin. "I made you something," she said, handing over a folded sheet. On the paper, drawn in bold crayon, was Irene, smiling, surrounded by stars and children. In her hand, a giant check floated above a crowd of stick figures with hearts in their chests. At the top, it read, "Miss Irene and the Magic Check." Irene swallowed hard. "This is beautiful, sweetheart." "That's 'cause you're magic," Molly said. "You made school not scary for my cousin." Irene tucked the picture into her purse, like treasure. At 9:22 that night, the power flickered once in Derek and Crystal's rental duplex. The rain had started again, soft at first, then steady. A slow percussion against the roof. Derek sat at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, trying to draft a flyer for his new business, Henderson Yard Services. "We dig deep!" But nothing sounded right. Nothing erased what people already knew. Crystal entered in a bathrobe and slippers, holding a box of generic cereal. "We're out of milk." Derek didn't look up. "I know." She stood there a minute, the silence a verdict all its own. "What do we do now?" she finally asked. He didn't answer. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, Molly's drawing sat on Irene's mantel, right beside her church fan, a jar of clover honey, and a brass frame photo of her late husband smiling with 2 toddlers in his lap. She stared at the drawing now, tracing the lines with her eyes. Some magic, she thought. Isn't lightning. It's just doing the hard thing with your head up. The land was overgrown, the kind of place people drove past without really seeing. 3 acres of knotted pine and sweet gum trees, tucked behind a rusted gate and a crooked mailbox in Cherokee County. The deed came in a padded envelope, the return address scrawled in an old-fashioned hand. Irene hadn't known her great-aunt still owned anything. "Left it to you," the lawyer said over the phone. "Said you'd know what to do with it." Irene stood at the tree line now, boots muddy, jacket zipped against the crisp fall wind. Her breath fogged as she walked the property's edge, her footsteps crunching over dead leaves and forgotten dreams. There was no house, just a clearing in the middle where sunlight broke through like a promise. Behind her, a pickup pulled in slowly. "Didn't expect to see it this big," said Marcus, stepping out. Cleo's son was tall like his mama, with the same easy calm. He wore a tool belt slung low and a beanie that didn't quite cover his ears. "I brought the generator and a sketchbook." She smiled. "You sure you don't mind? I'd rather build benches for kids than pour concrete for gas stations. This feels like something that lasts." They got to work, clearing brush, marking posts. By dusk, they had a map in hand and sweat on their foreheads. That night, Irene lay in bed with sore knees and a mind on fire. She could see it already. A circle of reading shelters made from reclaimed wood, solar lanterns hanging like fireflies, hammocks strung between trees, and children curled up with books where squirrels once darted. Second Chance Hollow. The name came to her like a whisper. It wasn't just for the kids. It was for every woman who'd been called too much, every boy who got labeled before he had a chance to show them different, for grown folks starting over and grandmothers finding peace and finally doing something that didn't ask them to shrink. It was for her. 2 weeks later, the permits came through. The county inspector called her personally. Said it's the first time someone's applied for land use to build something that didn't involve cutting down everything green. Insurance followed. She used lottery funds like they were borrowed blessings. Never flashy, never careless. Every dollar was spent like it had a soul. By early November, there were hand-painted signs at the edge of the road. "Welcome to Second Chance Hollow, where stories grow." Marcus had carved them himself and lacquered the wood until it gleamed under morning light. The shelters went up next, open air, each one with a theme. The Wonder Cabin for fantasy, the Corner Nook for comics, the quiet porch for kids who needed space more than noise. The first bench arrived on a trailer pulled by Marcus's truck. He backed it in slow, then helped Irene set it under a wide oak. She ran her fingers over the smooth wood. Etched into the top rail were the words, "This seat was made for stopping and starting over." Irene's throat tightened. "You didn't have to," Marcus shrugged. Figured it'd speak for itself. The next morning, a white Chevy Silverado slowed as it passed the edge of the hollow. Derek sat behind the wheel. He hadn't planned on driving this way, but a mulch drop-off in Canton ran late, and his GPS rerouted him down County Line Road. He would have missed it entirely, but something about the sign caught his eye. Second Chance Hollow. He pulled over and stared. The new wood, the fresh gravel drive. In the distance, Irene walked between trees, holding a clipboard. A child followed her, holding a book upside down and giggling. He stayed in the truck, watched. Something heavy pressed against his chest, a kind of ache that came with realizing how far he'd drifted from who he used to be. He reached into the passenger seat and picked up the flyer he'd printed that morning. His business name across the top in thick, hopeful letters. Henderson Yard Services. We dig deep. He turned it over, then back again. The rain started soft, just a whisper against the windshield. He looked at Irene one last time, then shifted into drive. He didn't know why he was coming back tomorrow, but he would. The text came in just after 6 a.m., when the sky was still the color of dishwater and the dew hadn't let go of the grass yet. Derek, hope you're well. Didn't want to bother you at the Hollow. Just wanted to say thank you. And I'm sorry for all of it. Irene stared at it from the recliner, her old flannel robe pulled tight around her shoulders, coffee cooling beside her untouched. The phone's glow lit the lines under her eyes, the soft sag of a life earned the hard way. She read it once, slowly, like it might shift in meaning if she gave it time. Then she deleted it. No reply, no pause, just gone. She tucked the phone face down and looked out the window at the faint outline of pine trees in the morning mist. He doesn't want forgiveness, she thought. He wants reset. He wants me to come back to the beginning with him, like none of it happened. But it did. Later that morning, Cleo was already on the porch when Irene stepped outside with 2 mugs. I brought cinnamon rolls, Cleo said, nodding toward the Tupperware on the table. Store-bought, but I warmed 'em so we can pretend I made 'em from scratch. Irene chuckled and eased herself into the chair beside her. They sat in silence, the way only people who've survived something together can. After a sip, Irene set her mug down. Derek texted me. Cleo raised an eyebrow. Did he now? Said he was sorry. Thanked me. Cleo let that hang in the air a second. Then, you respond. I deleted it. Cleo exhaled. Not relief exactly, not surprised either. He doesn't want forgiveness, Irene said. He wants reset. Cleo's face didn't change, just the slightest nod. Then she muttered, too bad this ain't a slot machine. Irene smiled at that, small but real. I don't hate him, she said. But I don't owe him softness either. That chapter's done. Well, Cleo said, grabbing a cinnamon roll. Some men get their clarity a decade too late. That afternoon, Irene returned from the post office with a stack of mail rubber banded together. She sat on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet, opening envelope after envelope, her legs stretched out like a kid at Christmas. They were handwritten, sloppy and sweet, from teenagers in places like Macon and Rome and Dalton. Some wrote on ruled notebook paper, others on pastel stationery, one on the back of a Sonic placemat. Miss Irene, I never thought I'd finish high school. I passed my GED. I cried right there in the parking lot. My little sister calls me smart now. She never used to. She read every single one, some twice, some aloud. One boy had drawn a star next to his name and signed it. From one hollow kid to another. By the end, her cheeks were streaked wet, but her smile was proud. Not loud, not showy, just steady. That night, the house was quiet except for the ticking kitchen clock and the soft tap of her pen against the table. She'd pulled out an old leather-bound notebook, one she hadn't touched in years. It smelled like dust and ink, and maybe a little bit of courage. At the top of the first page, she wrote, "Things I never said out loud." Then underneath, she began her list. Not confessions, not regrets, just truths. I was lonelier in my marriage than I've ever been in a room by myself. Shame will sit on your chest if you let it. And it doesn't pay rent. People talk about starting over like it's a door you walk through. It's not. It's a damn staircase. And some days you don't feel your legs. She wrote until her hand cramped, until the clock whispered toward midnight, until the silence felt less like emptiness and more like space. 3 days later, she got a padded envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was a crisp white gift card taped to a folded piece of notebook paper. The kind they sell at the grocery store checkout, for Target or Home Depot or Barnes & Noble. It was for $100. No note. Just a single sentence in blocky handwriting. You did the right thing, and you did it right. Sheriff Dan. Irene stared at it, unsure whether to laugh or cry. The sheriff who once turned his back when she needed protection most had just given her a silent apology, tucked inside a gesture that spoke louder than all the words he'd failed to say back then. She slipped the card into the back of her journal and ran her hand down the edge of the page she'd just filled in. I am not the same woman who once asked permission to be believed. She closed the notebook gently. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. Unknown number. No voicemail. Just a single missed call. She stared at the screen for a long moment before tapping to block it, then turned off the ringer. Through the window, the porch light bathed the yard in soft gold. Somewhere beyond it, past the pines and the gravel, Second Chance Hollow waited for its first fall bonfire. Irene pulled her cardigan tighter, stepped out onto the porch, and looked at the stars. Whatever was next, she was ready to meet it face first. The air was brisk that morning, just cold enough to make people walk a little faster from their cars, shoulders hunched, breath rising in clouds. Second Chance Hollow buzzed softly with life. A handful of kids in rain boots chased leaves across the gravel path, their laughter darting like sparrows between the trees. A volunteer checked the little free library box near the Wonder Cabin. The scent of wood smoke and cinnamon drifted from a crock pot warming inside the staff shelter. Irene was at the front desk, placing a sticky note beside the sign-in sheet that read, "Please don't feed the chipmunks, no matter how polite they look." She smiled to herself, then heard the door open behind her. Boots, hesitant ones. She turned. Her smile didn't falter, not even a little. Crystal. Same long lashes, same nervous posture. Her hair was neater now, pulled back into a careful bun, but her eyes darted like someone walking into a room where too much history lived. "Hi," Crystal said, tucking a stray curl behind her ear. I had a 10:15 for the program coordinator role." Irene didn't blink, didn't flinch. She simply nodded and stepped forward. "That's right. I'm Irene, founder and director." Crystal's smile froze mid-lip. "Oh," a beat passed, then another. "It's really nice here," she said, glancing around like the trees themselves might turn on her. "Peaceful." "Thank you," Irene said. Her tone was kind even, steady as a lake on a windless day. "We built it to be." Crystal clutched her tote bag tighter. "Didn't realize you were the one who—" She caught herself. I saw the article in the Tribune, but it didn't click." "That happens," Irene said. She gestured toward the clipboard on the desk. "You're welcome to sit for the interview. Or not." Crystal opened her mouth, then closed it again. "I'm not here to make anything weird," she said quickly. I needed the work. And when I saw the listing, I thought, maybe I could do something good." Irene nodded, eyes never leaving hers. Second Chance Hollow isn't for thieves or liars. That part's true. Crystal paled slightly, the words landing like a soft slap. Irene wasn't raising her voice, wasn't making a scene. But nothing about the moment felt small. "But it is a place for change," Irene added, voice like rain just starting to fall. "Real change, the kind that hurts before it heals." Crystal blinked fast, forcing a smile that didn't make it all the way to her eyes. "Well, that's powerful." Irene waited. Crystal's fingers hovered near the pen on the clipboard, then dropped back to her side. "I shouldn't have come," she said finally, voice cracking just a little. "I thought maybe—" "Never mind," Irene tilted her head. "You thought maybe time washed it away." Crystal nodded, barely. "Time doesn't clean anything," Irene said gently. "Only the work does." Crystal stood there for another moment, then turned, walked slowly back to the door. "Best of luck," Irene said, not unkindly. "Wherever you land." Crystal didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind her like the end of a sentence. An hour later, Cleo arrived with a crate of pumpkins and a grin sharp enough to cut glass. "You handled that like royalty," she said, setting the crate down with a grunt. "All calm and holy and risen above and whatnot. I almost didn't recognize you." Irene smirked as she stapled up the afternoon schedule. "Would have been easier to throw a chair," Cleo added. "That's what I'd have done in my 20s. Probably yelled something biblical, like, 'Get thee gone, Jezebel.'" Irene laughed. "It's too early for you to be this dramatic." I'm just saying, Cleo said, straightening up. That was class. Pure class. Irene didn't respond right away. Her eyes had drifted toward the window, where a group of middle schoolers were stringing paper leaves between two trees. Each leaf had a sentence on it, something they were proud of, something they'd survived. I think about who I used to be sometimes, Irene said softly. How small I made myself just to keep things quiet. How often I let things go that should have been said out loud. Cleo glanced at her. And now, Irene tapped the schedule against the desk to straighten it. Now I speak up, and I stay standing. Just then, her phone buzzed in her pocket. She ignored it, finished pinning the schedule to the corkboard. When she finally checked the screen, it was a message from an unfamiliar number. Unknown. There's something you need to know about Derek. Please call me. She stared at it, her smile gone. Cleo saw the look on her face. What now? Irene didn't answer, not yet. Outside, the wind picked up, sending a swirl of orange leaves tumbling across the gravel. A storm was coming. Maybe not today, but soon, and Irene knew. Some truths didn't stay buried forever. The envelope arrived in early spring, thick and official-looking, the kind that usually meant bad news or government forms. But when Irene opened it, she read the letter twice, then once more aloud, to no one at all. Oklahoma Woman of Literacy. Impact Award, presented to Irene Louise Merritt for exceptional contributions to educational access, community storytelling, and generational healing through literacy. The ceremony would be in Tulsa, black tie optional. A gala, apparently. They were flying her out, giving her a hotel suite, and said she could bring a guest. She set the letter down on the kitchen table, where a cracked ceramic bowl held last week's mail and this morning's lemon. Then she whispered to the air, I used to shelve books barefoot when the AC broke. Now they want me in pearls. That May, the old regional library in Muskogee, the same one where Irene had pushed carts and filed returns in her 20s, unveiled a new mural in the children's wing. A portrait, 12 feet high, painted in warm brushstrokes and afternoon light. Irene, smiling, one arm held open a book, the other cradled a handful of wildflower seeds. Around her ankles, painted children ran barefoot through painted grass, some with books in hand, others planting flowers. Underneath, in looping script, the words read, She gave us roots and reasons. A local 5th grader had written it. They put her name at the bottom in glitter paint and let her cut the ribbon. Irene stood at the back of the room, pressed against a wall, watching kids point and laugh and chase one another around her likeness, like it was just another tree in the park. She didn't say much that day, but she held onto the bookmark one of the kids handed her, a homemade thing, laminated with Scotch tape and lopsided stickers. It read, Miss Irene makes reading feel like running. Derek sat in his truck in the driveway of his latest client, some HOA job involving shrubs, symmetry, and a foreman who treated him like wallpaper. The magazine submission he'd emailed 3 weeks ago sat unopened in his inbox. Status still marked unread. Pitch: My ex-wife won the lottery and built a school in the woods. He thought it was catchy. He'd even rewritten it twice, added some flair, made himself sound self-aware, even included a few jokes. But it didn't land. Nobody bit. He stared at the phone screen like it owed him something, then tossed it onto the passenger seat. The weeds weren't going to pull themselves. Crystal scanned a chipped bottle of nail polish and a box of clearance greeting cards. $4.92, she said, without making eye contact. The customer handed her a $5. Crystal opened the till, made change, and reached for the next item in the slow, practiced rhythm of someone who had mastered invisibility. The store was quiet, just a hum of lights and the occasional squeak of carts. No ambition here, no spark, just hours punched and coupons clipped. She sometimes caught herself looking at the job board near the back and thinking of that morning at Second Chance Hollow, of Irene's voice, measured, merciful, unflinching. Some mistakes echo longer than the apology that follows. Meanwhile, back at the Hollow, The sun was gold and forgiving. Children wove paper crowns from construction leaves and ribbon. A group of volunteers planted herbs in raised beds, laughing about whose basil would win the imaginary Most Improved award. Inside the reading shelter, Irene moved from table to table with a canvas satchel full of bookmarks, each one hand-punched and stamped with a quote from her upcoming book. She handed them out like seeds, watching the kids' faces light up when they read lines like, "Your story isn't too small. The ending isn't written yet. Even quiet roots break concrete." Each child took one. Some asked for more, to give to their siblings, or to keep tucked in books they hadn't opened yet. Irene paused near the story circle, where Molly, the little girl with the puffball ponytails and crayon art from months ago, now sat cross-legged reading aloud to two younger kids. The joy of it, a child giving story, made something shift in Irene's chest. Not pain, not pride exactly. Something between breath and prayer. Cleo stepped beside her and whispered, "This is what I meant, back when you thought revenge had to be loud." Irene smiled, eyes full. Turns out healing has better acoustics. They laughed, soft and knowing. Then Irene's phone buzzed in her cardigan pocket. A voicemail. Same number from the week before. The one she'd ignored. She stepped aside and pressed play. A woman's voice this time. Low, urgent. "Ms. Merritt, I'm not sure how to say this, but Derek's been hiding something. About what happened. About why he left. I think you deserve to know." The message ended there. Irene stood in the sunlight, surrounded by giggles, mulch, and wildflower dreams, and stared at the horizon like it had just shifted. Some truths take years to circle back, but when they do, they don't knock. They walk right in. The shadow box wasn't flashy, just a simple square frame, dark walnut stain, smooth finish, hung at chest height in the main hallway of Second Chance Hollow. Inside it sat a single, faded lottery ticket. Underneath, in block lettering on cream cardstock, Irene Wyatt, original claimant, verified and confirmed. It sat between a timeline of the Hollow's milestones and a wall of Polaroids, dozens of snapshots of kids planting flowers, reading in hammocks, and high-fiving volunteers in muddy boots. But the ticket was what stopped people. The yellowing paper, preserved behind glass, had a crease down the middle and a faint coffee stain in one corner. It looked ordinary, nothing magic about it, except that it had changed everything. Not because it was money, because she used it like it had meaning. "I'm not gonna lie," said Cleo that morning, peering over her reading glasses as she watched Irene inspect the finished display. "That's the classiest thing I've ever seen done with 2 inches of cardboard," Irene chuckled. It felt silly at first, putting it up like it's a diploma or a trophy. "But it's not about showing off," Cleo said. "It's about telling the truth. You got lucky, and then you got busy." She patted Irene's shoulder. "What a shelf you built." Irene stared at the shadow box a moment longer. "It's strange," she said. "After all the fighting, all the proof people asked for, now no one questions it. Not the grant directors, not the news outlets, not even the woman who left that voicemail. Maybe because you already answered them," Cleo said. "Just not with words." That afternoon, a group of students from a local middle school toured the Hollow as part of their spring literacy project. One girl, freckles, oversized hoodie, missing shoelace, lingered at the display. Her head tilted slightly as she studied the ticket. Then she turned to Irene, who had just stepped into the hall with a stack of bookmarks. "Hey," the girl said. "You're the lottery lady, right?" The air could have gone still. A few years ago, maybe it would have. But Irene just smiled. "No, sweetheart," she said. "I'm the reading lady who won a lottery." The girl grinned at that, like she was letting herself believe something bigger. "Cool." After the kids left, 2 of the Hollow's teen volunteers, Marcus's younger cousins, brought in a small plaque for the bottom of the display. They'd carved it by hand. It read, "The ticket gave her power. She gave it purpose." They affixed it under the frame with wood glue and quiet reverence. Irene stood nearby, watching it settle into place. That ticket had once been a secret she didn't know how to hold. Then it became a target, a test, a thing others wanted to define for her. Now it was just a receipt, proof of something she chose to do, not who she was. The staff gathered in the hallway that evening, once the kids were gone and the tools put away. Someone passed out cups of lemonade. Molly, now in 4th grade, played taps on a kazoo from the donation bin. Badly, but enthusiastically. Cleo raised her cup. To the woman who turned luck into legacy. The others echoed the cheer. Irene shook her head, smiling. To the ones who showed up to build it with me. Later, after the lights dimmed and the gravel lot emptied, Irene stayed behind in the hallway. She traced the edge of the frame with her fingertips. The ticket was still there, still holding its weight, like her voice. But as she turned to leave, her phone buzzed again. A name this time, one she hadn't seen in years. Derek Henderson, no number, just his name, bold and certain. She froze, then let the screen go dark in her hand. Some truths didn't need defending, but some still demanded reckoning. The daffodils went in just after sunrise. Irene knelt in the soil outside the reading shelter, hands wrapped in old gardening gloves, knees cushioned by a folded towel. The ground was damp and rich, warm where the sun had touched it, cool where it hadn't. She dug each hole with care, the bulbs set gently, like wishes she already trusted to bloom. Marcus had offered to bring in pre-grown planters, but Irene declined. "I want these to grow slow," she told him, "so the kids see the waiting part, too." Now she pressed the last bit of soil down around the final bulb and leaned back on her heels. Rows of soon-to-be yellow lined the walkway, each one tucked like a promise beneath the earth. Behind her, Cleo appeared with a thermos in one hand and 2 mismatched mugs in the other. "Well," she said, handing one over, "you built yourself a kingdom of wildflowers and borrowed hope. What's next, Your Grace?" Irene took a sip. Black coffee, strong enough to stand up in. Cleo leaned against the post. "What will you do with the rest of the money?" The question floated gently, no pressure behind it. Irene didn't answer right away. She looked out across the hollow. Kids in puffer jackets chasing a soccer ball too flat to bounce. A teen tutor teaching flashcards to a boy with a stutter. Marcus reinforcing a bench the wind had tried to claim. "Spend it on people who never asked," she said finally. "The quiet ones. The ones who stopped dreaming out loud." Cleo smiled. "You always did know how to make your pain grow something good." That afternoon, the new sign went up near the main trailhead. Carved from reclaimed oak, hand-painted letters in forest green. Second Chance Hollow for the ones no one bet on. No fanfare, no speech. Just Irene holding the ladder while the teen volunteers mounted it into place. When it was done, she stepped back and stared. "I almost bet against myself once," she murmured. Cleo, standing behind her, said softly, "Good thing you didn't." That evening, Irene cooked dinner for one. Roast chicken, potatoes with rosemary. She still set 2 places out of habit. One for her, one for a memory. She ate slow, savoring every bite. The way people do when they're not rushing anymore. Afterward, she curled up in her recliner with a quilt over her legs and a worn copy of The Color Purple in her lap. She didn't make it more than 20 pages before she fell asleep, book resting on her chest, the last sentence halfway underlined. Outside, wind moved through the trees with the hush of something sacred. Peace didn't shout, it settled. The retreat library was nearly empty the next morning, just a few early risers flipping through pages and whispering to one another like conspirators in a magic shop. A small boy with thick glasses wandered the shelves. His coat sleeves were too long and his shoelaces untied. He reached up to the fiction section and pulled down a book that looked bigger than his head. Inside the front cover, stamped in blue ink, "Donated by I." Wyatt. He ran his fingers over the name like it might tell him a secret. Then he hugged the book to his chest and curled into the beanbag near the corner window. He didn't notice Irene watching from the doorway, mug in hand, face unreadable. But she saw him, and she saw what he was carrying, more than just a story. In the quiet of her home that night, Irene opened her journal, the same one where she'd once written, "Things I never said out loud." She flipped to the final page, took a breath, then wrote, "My son and his wife stole my lottery ticket and laughed when I demanded it back. They weren't laughing when they learned I'd already claimed the prize and reported them for theft." She set the pen down. Outside, the daffodils stirred in the soil. Inside, a reckoning had bloomed.